I'd like to call this meeting of the Brighton Area School Board of Education to order, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Start roll call, please.
Mr. Kraus?
Here.
Dr. Chesney?
Here.
Mr. Stahl?
Here.
Mrs. Minor? Here. Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Mr. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Birchfield?
Thank you very much. Next item up on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion?
I think we have a couple of additions.
Okay.
One is item D for future action, and it's consideration of elimination of pay to participate.
Okay, that's under D for future. And is there anything else?
Yes.
Letter
For action.
D. That'll be part of it.
Letter O for action, it's the L4029. We did receive our property tax piece that we have to approve.
Okay, we have two additions to the agenda tonight. Do we have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have support.
Support.
Motion and support. Any more discussion on the agenda for tonight? All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0, 1 absent. Next item up, recognition. Dr. Gray.
It's not in your packet, but we begin tonight with our BHS teacher, Tanya Clark. She has some well-dressed, well-respected men here tonight. So, Tanya?
Hi, good evening. I'm Tanya Clark. I'm the marketing teacher at the high school, and I would like to give some shining stars to my DECA students. DECA is an association of marketing students that help emerging leaders in business, entrepreneurship, finance, and marketing. And it's a club at the high school. It's a co-curricular activity, actually part of the marketing program. And 4 gentlemen, 3 of which who are here today, represented Brighton High School and Michigan DECA at the International State Career Conference in Orlando, Florida. And I would like to give recognition to them. There are over 220,000 international DECA students, and at internationals in Orlando, 16,000 competed, and they were one of the top 250 in the categories that they placed in. So I'd like to recognize our first one right here, Cal Salloway. He certified the Heather's Paw, which is our school-based enterprise at the high school. So he wrote a 40-page paper and presented at international competition. And then, Cal, can you stand up, please? And then we have Jason Konjaknanu and Andrew Goebel, and they represented the travel and tourism team decision-making event at International. So we represented Michigan DECA, and we had one more who's not here today. He's working, Danny Seahays. He also represented Brighton High School and Michigan DECA at the conference. So I'd like to give kudos to them.
If we could have them come around the board. Second tonight, we would like to recognize, and we do this time every year, our teachers that will be receiving tenure this year. If we have any of those teachers in the audience tonight, if they please stand when I read their name, and then afterwards zip around the board and I can give you your certificate, I would appreciate it. We have several tonight. We'll start with grade 6 Maltby Intermediate teacher Dawn Eldred. Then we have a French teacher from Maltby Intermediate and Spencer Elementary, Jean Marie Maffa. And then we have a grade 6 teacher at Maltby Intermediate, Lisa Zalewski. Social studies teacher at the high school, Shannon Headley. Auto technology teacher at the high school, Rocky Roberts. Mathematics teacher at the Bridge Alternative High School, Matthew Evans. An art teacher at the Bridge Alternative High School, Jacob Van Note. And our kindergarten teacher at Hawkins Elementary, rounding out our tenured teachers tonight, Rochelle Stawarski. So congratulations to those teachers. Oh, hold on. Yep. A couple other shining stars tonight. We start, and if this parent could please come forward with parent from Spencer Elementary, Carrie Pilon. She was nominated to receive a Shining Star recognition for volunteerism and exceptional work with the Spencer Carnival. Her commitment to the school and countless hours of detailed planning in order to make a successful event become possible is worthy of a Shining Star. BAS is proud to have such a dedicated parents and volunteers. And Carrie, is Carrie here tonight? I saw Carrie. I'm going to embarrass you. Stand up, Carrie. And could you please wait before we clap? Carrie, how much did we raise at that particular event? $22,600. For Spencer Elementary, so congratulations, Carrie. Tonight we also have Mr. Vecchione from the high school, and he has a couple of shining stars for us as well. So, Mr. Vecchione.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Our first recipient for a Shining Star we thought would be Teresa Meyer. I've known Teresa for about 10 years since her oldest daughter was at Scranton. She has put in countless hours as a PTO volunteer. I do not believe she's here this evening. Look for her already. I do apologize for not doing that first. This year, she and her husband have already DJ'd some dances. They help out in the community. And she is the head of our senior all-night party. Just a huge endeavor. But we felt that Teresa, her youngest is graduating now, so we may lose her, has put in a lot of hours. We want to recognize her for a Shining Star first. So, Teresa Meyer. Our second Shining Star, I knew even longer than I knew Teresa Meyer, Johanna Uhas. Johanna and I have been working together since she was a parent at Spencer Elementary School. But she's done she's been working with Science Olympiad, John, as you know, for over 10 years. And she's leaving us because her baby's graduating. So she has a passion for science, she has a passion for engineering, and she has helped convey and translate this passion not only to guys, but to women as well, who are at the university level studying these areas now. We are truly going to miss both Dennis, her husband, and Johanna, Science Olympiad. They left us in good hands, I understand, have a new parent volunteer. So with that, Johanna Uhas as well. Thank you.
That's all we have tonight.
All right, this brings us to the time of call to the public. This is the time we get to address the Board of Education. If you'd like to address us now, please approach the podium. You have 3 minutes. You'll be given a yellow warning by Dr. Chesney when you have 30 seconds left, and then a red one when we're all done with your 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Glenn Eikens, live at 125 North 4th Street in Brighton. It is my understanding that you will be voting on our LESA board election representative tonight, and that one of the candidates is Mr. Nick Fiani. I want to urge this board to reject his bid for that election. I believe that Mr. Fiani showed contempt for this board, for the citizens of Brighton, for the process of consideration for the ACA school. His tenure as trustee and then president was marred by divisiveness and contentious and even embarrassing public attention. His commitment to his board seat was questionable. He pursued the nomination for a congressional seat while on this board. He also resigned abruptly and with little explanation to seek a seat at LESA, failing to live up to his commitment to those who elected him and those he was to serve. Lastly, Mr. Fiani's loyalty to the Brighton area schools was questionable. His outside alliances were rather apparent. His relationship with the ACA, the American Classical Academy, seemed to define much of his action on the board. In sum, I think that Mr. Fiani proved himself irresponsible, fickle, and mercurial in his duties, his commitment to this community and these schools, and I believe it would be irresponsible for this board to support his candidacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Striker. Would anybody else like to address the Board of Education at this time? I see none. That closes our call to public. And if the DECA guys want to, they can go now. If you want to stay, you can. But we'll give you a second to kind of clear out where we're moving on with this. Or anybody else that came for anything, at the beginning. So thank you for your time. So next item up is board reports. Dr. Suri, you have something for us?
Yes, I asked to have just a moment to introduce somebody very special in my life tonight to this audience and to the board. This past weekend was Memorial Day weekend, and as many of you, I spent time watching the History Channel and all the World War II channel and thinking about my grandfather who served in World War II, and a lot of us have relatives who do that. And there were parades and sales in stores apparently that I can't figure out why they're open on that day, but they are. But I invited a friend of mine this evening. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce him and acknowledge him for his service to this country. My next door neighbor, Mr. Clifford Emery, I'm going to ask Clifford to stand up if he doesn't mind. Clifford has been my neighbor for probably 15 years, but more importantly, he's a World War II vet. And I've listened to stories for the last 10, 12 years of he started out as in the Army for the Canadians in the Pacific. And when he left the Canadians, he moved into the United States and he re-enlisted it for the United States and served again a tour of duty in the Pacific. And this past week, he still continues to serve us because this past week he drove me to the emergency room when I cut my finger, helped me chase down a wayward dog. He's just a very special member of our community, and we don't acknowledge our World War II vets enough. And I'm sorry, I apologize for hijacking the meeting, but I just really wanted to take an opportunity for you all to honor a really great American. So.
Thank you, Dr. Suri. Thank you, Ms. Riley. I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart
And
for what you do for our country.
Yes, and just so you know, I told Cliff, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting. So,
You probably don't deserve that.
oh, you might want to listen to the next part, though, okay?
Okay, you might want to stick around. Okay, any other board reports? Oh, we have another here. You go ahead.
Just a short one on the Oversight Committee. We're still working on Phase 3, some budgeting, and we'll hopefully have something by the end of this week. And also as to the questions, Bill, I got this pack together for you regarding the switch box, and I think Dr. Gray has something he wants to speak about tonight as well.
I was going to talk about our superintendent's report, but I can answer it now, and I've already communicated it. So the question on the switchgear was a $6,000 report. in negotiations back and forth with AUK and Green Line. They have eliminated the $6,000 report, so the $6,000 report. So instead of a $48,000 venture, it's about a $42,000 venture. And I have the new change order, so I'd like to move forward and sign that since we've gotten to where we wanted to be.
So this brings up the topic, again, of AUK construction. And they're supposed to be looking out of our best interests. That's why we hired them. They're the owners. We're paying them well over millions of dollars worth of our taxpayers' bond money to do this service for us. They didn't fight this fight with Green Line Electric, okay? They weren't the ones that went to Green Line and looked into all this paperwork to say why we should eliminate this fee. It was clearly stated in the specifications. If you're bidding this package, you need to include this particular study in your bid. Well, they didn't get to the bottom of it. They didn't say, they wanted to pay it, okay, because they didn't want to hassle the county. You dig into it, it says, we don't have to pay it. We just saved ourselves $6,000. It wasn't AUK Construction that saved ourselves $6,000. They're the ones that are supposed to be looking after our best interests on these change orders. And I'm getting upset and I'm getting tired of having to look over AUK's shoulder to make sure this stuff is being done in the best interest of Brighton area schools. And at this point in time, I don't feel it is. They're late on things, they're not giving us the reports, they're required to give us a monthly report with schedules, timing, budgets. We don't get any of this stuff. And they're still getting paid the money that they're asking for. And it bothers me to think that they're still working for us under those conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbull.
Not to stop that, am I to pay this change order, I guess is my question. Okay, I just want to make sure I have consensus to pay it. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I have three things. First off, LESA had a joint budget presentation a week or so ago, and they invited members of all of the different school boards to a meeting, and Mr. Stahl and Mrs. Minor and myself were able to attend. And it was a pretty efficient way of getting the budget presented, and that's going to come later on item N under 4 action, so I won't go into any detail on that. Dr. Gray was there as well. But it was a nice way to make a very solid budget presentation and have invite everybody at the same time to the room. So that was something. Another thing I want to bring up, and this is from Brighton High School, and I would like to bring this up as a upcoming shining star, but they recently had the Senior Survivor Week, where 12 students, 6 teams, and there was a couple of student leaders. Lynette Day was the host and coordinator. Gavin and Henry had a lot of involvement in it. But they had 12 students who basically stayed overnight in school for a whole week.
4 nights.
Four nights, and raised right around $10,000 for Elle's Place, which is a support center for grieving children. So I'll pass those names down to Star and make sure at the next meeting that we acknowledge them for.
That was the first year of that project.
Yeah.
So that was a big win for that project.
It was huge, and it was just.
Those kids were whooped by the end of the week, but it was great.
Yeah, so wonderful idea. I've got all the names here, and like I said, I'll pass that down. So I think they should be acknowledged. And then finally, just one thing. I really want to positively acknowledge everyone on the board for the exceptionally healthy debate that we had at the last meeting about the paid up participant. I mean, it was just everybody had their opinions heard, and it was, in my mind, and thanks to Mr. Kraus for running the meeting well and running that well, but everybody got their point across, everybody was heard, and I just thought that it was an exceptional debate on a somewhat heated issue, and it was just nice to have that. And that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Mr. Conley, you're on the clock.
Well, we're on the clock. Start time. This is also regarding Memorial Day. This is also regarding Memorial Day, and we're going to just a little help to do this, and hopefully I can give tribute the way I'm supposed to here. We'll start. What drives me in this to do what's right. This is my dad, and he's doing a little bit of recovery right now. He's at a a center where they're helping him with his walk. It talks about he was in the U.S. Air Force just after World War II. But we pay special tribute to you, our veteran out here, for your military service to America and for advancing the universal hope of freedom and liberty for all. And I think it applies to all the situation that we're talking about. So I saw that laying there for my dad, and I said, it was really nice. I put it on the counter in this little room, and he's kind of doing his little recovery thing, and that he was thought of. And my dad said, that's no big deal, right? Well, to me as his son, it's a big deal. So in that, we continue on. For my father, I have a list of all the veterans in our family, okay, from his brothers on down the line. And I brought some other special ones, and I'll get to them in a second. So my dad was in the U.S. Air Force just after World War II. His brother Horace, Brighton, another Brighton high guy, Brighton schools, World War II combat veteran, U.S. Navy. Decommissioned 2 ships under him during the war, but he survived to come home. His brother, Bud, World War II veteran, taken prisoner in the Battle of the Bulge. He lived to come home and made it to about 50. Uncle Charlie, U.S. Navy Master Sergeant, lives right over here, or he did, right here on Spencer Road. His wife still lives there. She's 92, my aunt. Very proud of Uncle Charlie. Uncle Larry, World War II U.S. Navy pilot, as well as Korea. My grandpa Conley, U.S. Army, World War I, and he's a combat soldier and survived. My friend Bill McKeon, from Howell, Michigan, is here in the middle. You can hold that up. He's right there in the middle. He was a sergeant, and he was drafted for Vietnam. And I did his eulogy at his funeral. And what I learned about the guys in the Army, he was drafted, but the work he did was superior. It was beyond anything I could believe. I read through his reports from his commanding officers. They wanted him to stay on as an officer, but he decided he did what he was asked to do, did his job, came home from Vietnam, and again, very proud of him. I had no clue that he was this MP Master Sergeant platoon leader. No idea. Until I did his funeral, and his family gave me all his records. And I was proud to do that for him. Okay, next one. There's a B-17 tail gunner. A friend of mine, Scott Reinecker, is a state police officer. His father is right here in the, over here, in that spot. He flew in World War II in a B-17, and he survived 35 missions, flying from England to Germany, which is fairly unheard of. So I met his father a year ago, and 2 years ago. It's interesting how school affects us. My principal from Brighton High School, Jerry Lester, he and I have been friends since I was 15. We organized an opportunity to take him down to a B-17 at Willow Run that's still flying. So Scott Reinecker, his son, his father, this war hero, we went down there and got to visit that, and I got to meet this hero. This man was the gentlest man you'd ever want to meet. He was kind, did his job for his country, and left it so we could do what we're doing here today. Came home, raised a great family. His son grew to the ranks in state police and becoming their Troopers Association president for Michigan State Police. So he's that guy right there. And so he would have been a sergeant and a tail gunner, and like I said, almost unheard of that he'd survive. Okay, next one. Again, my friend Jerry Lester, principal for Brighton High School. This guy right here, you don't see a picture of him, but he's flying the airplane, and that's an actual shot during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. He shot down 4 airplanes that night. This guy's Lieutenant Bolin. So Jerry Lester, our principal for Brighton Schools, brought this Mr. Bolin to Brighton. He said, John, you got to come meet this guy. This is 3 years ago. We're at a hotel up here off of 96. I walked in there, and here's this man, and he was the most humble servant for our country that you'd ever want to meet. He didn't think he was an ace pilot. He went on after World War II and put over 4,000 hours in flying, training the next pilots to come. So while this man's flying overhead, shooting down German aircraft, my uncle was on the ground fighting, and also who our school's named after, Bob Scradden, was on the ground fighting. Okay, both of them were taken prisoner in Battle of the Bulge. So this man, you wouldn't have thought you'd ever meet somebody that was flying overhead while your own family's fighting the war, but we did. And he's passed this last year. What a great another hero. Thank you. And this guy right here, there you go, worked for me for 13 years. His name's Bob Miley. Had no idea about his military history, U.S. Army. So I go to a funeral. 5 Bronze Stars. So we'll pass him up. This guy, you wouldn't have known. But all I know is when I didn't call him to come in to do the job, he'd call me on the phone and say, how come you didn't call me? I said, what do you mean call me? He said, I'm your man. Okay? I said, I didn't understand. But that's how credentialed he was. 5 Bronze Stars, 3 years in combat, never came home. And then in my wife's side of the family, her father, World War II veteran. Stayed stateside, was in some kind of communications in Florida. Her brother, U.S. Air Force Sergeant. Her sister, Lieutenant in the Navy. And that's before women probably were in the Navy that much. She's now 60. So what I'm saying is we have a lot of responsibility to this man for what he did for us and to our families that have put us in this position. We didn't get here by accident. We got here by a lot of people doing a lot of hard work and making sacrifices for us. And these men that I've gotten to meet along the way, and that brings me back to this one too, almost. I don't have a picture of Miles' dad, but Miles View's dad, Miles is a big wrestling guy, so I brought this from the shop just to use it so I remember what I was doing. I grew up next to Miles' dad as a kid. Miles' dad was in the U.S. Navy, World War II, and I watched him save a life one day. Everybody's goofing around the lake. And this guy was, Manning View was probably in his 70s, and somebody was drowning in the lake, right? We're all doing our thing. And I see this man, just like he was in high school track, go and rip this kid out of the lake and save his life. He obviously was well trained and knew what he was doing, right? There we go again. What do our military guys mean to us? Well, he was very retired at that point. I'm sure his body didn't want to do that, but I was very proud of him to see that. And again, Manning View was a great neighbor, and like I said, I'm proud of Miles. And I look at these young men in here and how hard they've all worked. I mean, this is their success stories. They worked very hard to get to this. So I'll say that Manning View and Miles had a little bit to do with Brighton's wrestling program to keep it up and running. And in closing, getting away from the military side, this is just a little picture of last year's Science Olympiad team, or not Science Olympiad, but robotics team, that a few years before was only 2 students. And this group was about 28, and this year was 40. These are our future. And we just had a meeting recently, last hour, talking about little vision that we have for our students. I'd like our board to remember, though, all of our families may have similar situations to me. I don't know. I know, Jay, I believe your father was in the military as well, and you've kept that pretty quiet, you being a lieutenant colonel and all those very important things, 20-plus years to our country. Thank you. But I think that we owe it to them to do a good job here, to see that our kids get the best education possible. And if we can make a difference for these kids, we're volunteering. Technically, a lot of those men were volunteers. And like I said, take my hat off to all of them, so I'll walk out and take this man's hand. And do that. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Any other board reports?
Yeah, the only one we have, if no other board members, is Mr. Beth, did you have one? Okay, is Mr. Thompson here tonight? We were asked to bring a kind of a history of pay to play and a history of the athletic department. So Mr. Thompson has put together a report for you, and I'll help supplement and take any questions if you guys have.
As Dr. Gray had mentioned, we've had some board members inquire about some of our financial history and how the finances work on the athletic department end, as well as pay to participate, as well as kind of the differentiation between funded athletic sports and unfunded athletic sports. So we will touch on those 3 topics. We will kind of start with the 20,000 overhead type of view, looking at where we're at in the big picture, and then we'll kind of boil it down here. So we've got 30 slides. I don't think we'll probably need to go through all 30. I think knowing our board members that you'll catch on pretty quickly to kind of how this is all laid out. But so what is Brighton Athletics? Who is Brighton Athletics? Basically, running out of the athletic department office are 32 programs, 99 plus teams. We service about 18,000 participations. So if Mr. Trombley is participating in one sport in the fall and then participating in another sport in the winter, that would be 2 participations. We have about 1,400 students, grades 7 through 12, that participate in Brighton athletics. So when you do the math there, you can see that out of 1,400 bodies versus 1,800 participations, unlike maybe the day and age when you and I were in school, the multi-sport athlete isn't quite as prevalent. We actually at the high school believe about 24, 27 3-sport athletes out of the 2,000 kids that go to Brighton High. So that's kind of who that is. I mean, 47% of BHS is involved in the athletic program, 44% of Scranton. Now those numbers, because we track those numbers because participation is really why we're here. So those numbers vary anywhere from about 44 to 45% on a year like this current year to upwards of about 50%. Fluctuates back and forth on a given year just depending on student interest. Athletic department staff. We have 161 people that work in Brighton athletics. So that's paid coaches, volunteer coaches. That does not include game workers. So that's just coaching staff, myself, and my assistant, Mrs. Cataldo. We run about 1,440 some events of the year, which when you boil it down to what do we exactly do all day aside from just watch ball games out in the middle of thunderstorms, there's about 22,000 function points, and that's a very minimal, rough estimate. Okay, and what I mean by function points is a contract goes out to an opponent, a contract goes out to an official, busing forms, all those type of things that have to get done to be able to make that event that's happening out in our parking lot, or about back of our parking lot, happen tonight. So for those 1,440 events. So BAS general fund cost per participation is $284 per participation on average. Okay, our per pupil, because we like to talk about per pupil costs in education, kind of one of those ways where you can boil it down. We know our per pupil funding from the state's a little around $7,000, give or take. Our per pupil cost is $365. So when we look at Brighton Athletics, in terms of expenditures, we're about $1.3 million operation a year. Okay? But what's interesting about that number is as you start to scale it down and drill it down and chunk it out into smaller parts, when you look at the general fund contribution that the district makes, it's contributing 37% of the total expenditures of the athletic department. 63% of those expenditures are self-generating. And we're going to talk about pay to participate here down the road here in a few minutes. So that's a revenue generating mechanism. Ticket sales are a revenue generating mechanism. Fundraising, which we do a ton of. And if you look at our internal account totals that will be coming up next, you'll see that. So where that self-generating revenue comes is from all of those different type of sources. Last year, and we're using 13, 14 numbers because that way we can be consistent, okay? Because this year's numbers are not final. The general fund contribution to Brighton Athletics was $511,000 and $507. Our admissions that we took in, okay, ticket sales, $5 ticket sales, $141,168. Our transportation revenue, which transportation, okay, so you know on our end what our goal in transportation is. You see a student athlete or a team on a bus, they are paying for that bus as an add-on to their pay to participate. So our goal on transportation that we facilitate for the teams is basically to try and get that close to a wash. Okay, so if Dr. Suri's son is on the lacrosse team, we take the total amount of cost that the lacrosse team would add up in mileage, we divide it by the number of kids, there is your add-on. So typically it costs us a little bit more. It's not a clean wash because we do a good bit amount of postseason travel, which we don't account for in terms of the original billing because you never know whether you're going and how far you're going. So that's a little bit on the transportation end. So our internal account totals, our fundraising totals for last year of total revenue coming in was $422,589.34. So a pretty good chunk of change spread across those 32 programs. Our actual expenditures were $922,857. Our internal account expenditures were $448,762. Our total annual expenditures were $1,371,619. So that's kind of the big 20,000 mile view picture of how the finances, the money works on a day-to-day basis as you boil that type of stuff down. So the total general fund contribution to Brighton Athletics is like 0.009% of your overall 13-14, $53 million budget. So those are your big picture numbers. So now let's take a look and scale this down and see what that means a little bit. So here's a couple sports. We got boys cross country up there. So our coaches' salaries are listed, all of our expenses are listed up there. You look under revenue, admission. We don't charge for cross country. So no revenue coming in for ticket sales. Pay to participate, when we look at the number of participants, times what that 175 cost in, brought in a little over $5,400. So if you look at our expenses, if you look at our revenue, you can see that when we have a per pupil expense in a sport like cross country, that can be a positive. So you'll see teams as we go through this, and there's not very many of them. It's typically high participant numbers. Girls cross country comes to mind, track and field, and we'll go through some of these examples to where, at the end of the day, your per pupil expense, it can be to the good side. If you look at volleyball on the other end, you also have I'm going to come back to boys cross country for a minute. Where actually, one of the things I want to explain, your parentheses are actually negatives in this report. So when you see parentheses, that's to the bad or to the red. It's in red on my copy. It's not in red on yours. So both in cross country, you're negative $113 per pupil participating. In volleyball, you're negative $351 per pupil participating. So let's click to another sport. Okay, so I mentioned girls cross country. We have a ton of girls come out for cross country. It's historically been a very strong program. So when we look at the number of students serviced, and we look at our admissions, or our expenses and our revenues, we're actually to the good $20 per pupil. But that's a rarity. And you'll see that as we go on. So boys tennis is on the other side of that screen. You can see that's a negative for 207 per pupil. One of the other numbers I want to point out is that you're looking at, that I put information for you, is the very last line is fundraising. Okay, that's total revenue coming into that particular sport's internal account, or i.e. fundraising account. So you understand what that number is. Okay, so let's talk about football, because everybody wants to talk about football, and everybody comes out on Friday night in Brighton and goes to the football games, and it's a great community event, and it is all of that. But we must sell a ton of tickets, and we must bring in a ton of money, and all of that. Okay, even in a good year, football runs at a negative. Okay, and football does a lot of self-supporting. All you have to do is look at the advertising around the stadium fence line. So last year, they took in about $40,000 in just soft money, if you want to call it that, fundraising dollars. We serviced 137 kids, but we still ran at a negative at $48. Okay, sideline cheer is not up there because we took those numbers and combined it. Cheer is sideline in the fall, competitive in the winter. From a financing standpoint, it's easier just to look at them the same. But let's click around. Let me find one here that would be of interest to you. If you see something you want me to go back, please let me know. Okay, so here's our POM program. Okay, so you'll note up there, sport, POM, varsity only, JV unfunded. So the numbers that you're looking at there are only representative of what our expenses and our revenues are for the varsity program, those 21 girls. The JV program that has 20 to 22 girls on it, we added as an unfunded program. And I'll touch about unfunded programs kind of when we get towards the back end of some of these slides here. But same formula, same type of things. So you're going to say, wow, let's look at this number here. Tom outraised the football team, 62 grand in fundraising. What you have to understand about our internal accounts is, for the most part, it's money in, money out to cover expenses that the district doesn't cover, okay? So why do we have $62,000, almost 63 grand going in and out of a common account? Well, they went to Orlando, okay, for nationals. So all that money to be able to cover the plane flights, the hotel rooms, all those type of things goes into that account, and then we write checks and pay bills back out of that account. So while it looks like a big number, they're not sitting on $63,000, I can guarantee you that. And I want to try and come up to, okay, you'll see here where we've got cheer, okay? Same kind of breakdown there. The only difference is we've times it by two seasons to be able to get that per pupil number. And on the right side, you'll see hockey, JV hockey. We added JV hockey, we added it unfunded. So those numbers only represent the varsity hockey program. You will note that hockey, okay, at $646, we rated all of these programs. That's one of your higher per pupil programs, as opposed to cross country that makes you 20 bucks a kid, or golf. But golf is actually a higher per pupil as well. So, but it just kind of varies in terms of what those expenses are. So we've got ski and boys swimming next. Kind of take a peek at those. Okay, so this is a good slide to stop at for a second. So we've got bowling up there and we've got gymnastics up there. So one of our board members, Mr. Birchfield, he's not here tonight, but he did ask me this question and I promised that I would answer it. What is the difference between a funded Brighton Athletic Department's board and an unfunded? Okay, so historically, we've added a number of programs over the last 10 years. Okay, gymnastics has not been one of those, and rugby. Both of those programs, in fact, I just talked to our gymnastics coach the other night. They've been around for 25 years as an unfunded program, which is a topic for another discussion. But those two were the original unfunded programs. So when we added bowling, both varsity bowling and then subsequently in about 2 years we added JV bowling. Great activity for students, kind of fits a different need athletically than some of our other programs does, unfunded. So as we look through that, we give them no money, okay, but yeah, we charge pay to participate. And we'll touch on the pay to participate. We have different scales, which we'll get into here towards the back end of this. So we take in $1,875 from them. So at the end of the day, we're plus per pupil because of those no expenses, but yet we're bringing revenue and pay to participate. That make sense? Good? Okay. So as we go through, you're going to see that same story play out in a number of these other slides here. Okay? With bowling, with the JV hockey, the JV pom. Here's a couple other ones, girls tennis. You can see that, yep.
I'm going back to slide 2, but you don't have to flip back. So we don't fund them in any way, shape, or form. We give them no help, but we still charge them pay to play.
Correct.
Why? What do they get for that?
What do they get for that? Well, let me give you the answer that I get when I get that question tons of times from our parents. It supports indirect costs.
Explain.
So what's indirect costs? That's then the follow-up question. Then I usually make a joke and I say, well, part of it's administration, and I said, I'm expensive. I bill out a lot more than some of those top lawyers. But it's also fields. Depending on the sport, we have unfunded sports that use school facilities, so there are indirect costs in terms of field maintenance, scheduling, all those type of things. in some of our unfunded sports that don't use school facilities, then the honest answer is administrative oversight, to be honest with you.
Who pays for their bowling alley time?
They do.
Who schedules their bowling
We're just
time?
talking about fields and maintaining those. And then
We do.
you're taking money in, but not
We
giving
schedule.
anything to help pay for their field?
Correct. And when we get to pay to participate, you'll see that we have these groups on different tiers. So we have a group of sports that don't use school facilities, that aren't funded at one tier. You'll see sports like boys and girls lacrosse, which were adds in the last 10 years that we don't fund, that do use school facilities, at a higher tier than, say, bowling. So we've tried to tier it to some extent to address that.
What does the tiering do besides kind of what you classify? I mean, what does tiering mean?
What does tiering mean?
Yeah.
Well, if you're on the low tier and paying $75 a head versus, say, a baseball player paying $175 a head, it saves you $100 out of your checkbook.
So the tiers are used to discriminate pay to participate, the amount of funds for pay to participate?
Correct. Because we recognize that those moms and dads
Okay.
also have to pay for the bowling lanes,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So that's why we've kind of created those different tiers. Yeah.
In the nutshell, what is our total pay to participate fees that we collect for everything?
About 200 grand.
Yeah. 200, it'll be about 200 grand this year. It's been as high as, I have that slide coming up. In fact, I'll kind of skip through because most of this, I'll stop at, you see the rugby example up there as a club thing. Here's a middle school example. I'll stop at this one and then we'll get to a slide that'll answer your question and show you the whole history. So we charge pay to participate at the middle school as well. So there's a revenue line for that. There's our expenses. We started charging gate fee at the middle school a few years back. So we charge $1 for students. We charge $3 for adults. So there is revenue line item coming in, not for middle school cross country, but if you look across to volleyball, you'll see that it's $2,000 is about on average what we bring in for tickets at middle school volleyball.
John, talking about gate fees, do those typically come out of league decisions or do those come out of your office?
That's a great question. The KLA sets those fees at the high school level. At the middle school level, it is a local control issue, but we have an agreement that we won't exceed. So we won't exceed $3 at the middle school level, and we won't exceed $5 at the high school level. So that's kind of a snapshot on the middle school end of things. Okay. Last slide, then we're going to come to the history of pay to participate. Those are non-sport costs, sports that come out of the athletic department office, the costs that are doing business. So athletic supplies that aren't sport specific, athletic trainer, capital outlay, repair and maintenance when equipment breaks, FICA, all those type of things. So you can kind of see what that adds up to, but it's not a slide that should be attributable to just a specific sport because it benefits all of those programs. Okay, so we also had the question on pay to participate. What's the history of pay to participate? So we started pay to participate in 94, 95. Okay, we ran it for 3 years, decreasing it each year. And then it took a little bit of a hiatus. Then we brought it back, okay, in 11, 12. And we've been running pay to participate ever since. So we have in the past, you'll see where we've reduced it by half, okay? And you'll see on a slide under the collection of fees where that's accounted for. And then we've reinstated it. And so that's kind of the history of Brighton area schools and pay to participate. It's been around a long time, for right, wrong, or indifferent. One other question that I did have a board member ask me is, okay, so you're going to get us the history of Brighton area schools. Well, tell us about the state of Michigan. Okay, so I researched that as well. I don't have a slide on it for you, but looking at about the last 6 to 7 years across the state, from On the low end, 45% don't charge. On the high end, 50% charge. And if you kind of look at that, and you look at when school districts started to get into financial trouble, and they started to look for some help, it kind of mirrors that. And as you see, as people come out of that financial trouble, that data mirrors that too. But half of the state does not charge pay to participate. In the KLA and in the West Division, which Brighton is in, Grand Blanc and Howell do not charge pay to participate. And that's about average when you go across the whole KLA.
John, when you talk about 50% of the schools don't charge, are they larger schools or smaller schools typically?
It varies. Where you tend to see less is in rural areas and urban areas. Okay, so an example in the KLA would be Wayne Memorial and Wayne Westland. They have never charged pay to participate. Okay, I can tell you, having worked up north, that in some of those rural communities, they were very late to the game and pay to participate. And if you look at what they charge, it's dramatically different than what a Brighton would, or a Heartland would, or a Livonia would, because of their constituencies.
So all this money, John, all this goes into the general fund, is that correct?
Yes.
That changed about 5 years ago.
Changed about 5 years ago.
So all the money we're talking about tonight goes into the general fund. Do you have any other accounts that you write checks out of, athletic accounts?
We have one account, but it's also a general fund account, because when the accounting services made that change, everything in athletics is general fund now.
So
But we
you don't
write
have
checks
an
for
account
officials.
with a different bank or anything
No.
else that you would ever write any athletic stuff out of? So even the fundraising money goes into the general account or in the general budget?
It doesn't go into the general fund account. It goes into our 6-2 accounts,
Okay.
our internal accounts. Technically, do we own that money? Yes, we do. Just like technically we own anything that's donated to us, whether it's a piece of property or it's a dollar bill. It's our responsibility to take care of it, be good shepherds of it. But how we treat it on a day-to-day basis is that it's those sports money for those things that we don't provide.
And that's purely the fundraising, or is that each board?
That's purely the fundraising money, and each program has their own internal account. So I sign off on all those purchases. I can't think of if there's been 2 times in the last 12 years at Brighton where I've said, no, we're not doing that. That would be about accurate, because
So
they're buying supplies.
who has the jurisdiction over that money?
The head coach, and then I sign off on that, and then Dr. Gistinger signs off on it.
So the money's put in their fundraising, the head coach can use it at his discretion?
His or her discretion, yep.
Okay. So no other accounts?
All the buildings have those too, the organization.
You have no other accounts?
We have no other accounts.
And 94, 95 was proposal A.
Proposal A was 94, and I was working in athletics at the time as well, and that's when pay-to-play kind of gained steam. The funding mechanism changed, and I remember I was in Grand Ledge at that time. I just graduated from college, working in the athletic department, and that was when Grand Ledge rolled it out. Now, in my other district, Wausau, we never had pay-to-play, because again, it was a financial burden in that area. In Grand Ledge, it wasn't. Here, it wasn't for the majority of the families. So I think if you were to look around and chart pay-to-play, I think you would see by far the largest spike was probably in the mid-90s, maybe the mid to late 90s, and it kind of tied into the funding mechanism changing.
That's accurate.
So right now, we contribute, the general fund has 500,000
Correct.
in there.
We offset.
Which is roughly a percent.
Well, it would be
0.009.
Right.
of the athletic budget, it's nearly half. It's probably 40% of our budget. If it's 50 million and you got $500,000, yeah, it's not 1%.
Roughly a percent.
Roughly.
So adding the 200 grand takes it to 1.3%.
Yeah, it's 1 or 1.1.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's the budgetary impact of that. roughly.
correct.
Coming back to pay to participate, and unfunded sports, one of the questions that was asked of me is why didn't we fund them when we added them? I can answer that in one sentence. We didn't have the money. But yet we still thought the activity was something positive for our kids, and hence we've also likewise set up a club structure for new programs coming out of the high school office to perhaps migrate into the athletic department. So, but the short answer is, when you don't have money, you can't add things and expect them funded.
But the club process, the reason it turned into a 3-year process is typically you would have somebody get excited about something, start a sport, and then a year and a half later, their kids graduate and they're not there anymore. So that's why there's the process of 3 years and you have to fund it, and because there has to be buy-in to those particular organizations.
So do we have that process for sports that hang out for, or that are, stay popular, they stay populated for more than 3 to 5 years?
We do. We look for that sustainability. The other factor that we have to look at, because we have to be accountable to this, is Title IX.
Yep.
So say you want to play boys ice soccer and it's all the rage and it's been around for 3 to 5 years. You say, well, we got sustainability. I want that to be out of the athletic department. That may be a great activity. However, if I don't have a female counterpart, that takes us out of our Title IX compliance. So we not only look at sustainability, funding, and all those type of things, we look at federal law. So here's a slide that Mr. Conley was inquiring about, and a couple others in reference to, this is our athletic paid participation and transportation fee history. So you can kind of see how that tracks out. You can see when it was reduced, why that number is so much lower than the others, and kind of how it's played out.
Why the ups and downs on transportation? Price of gas, or is it that simple?
Well, no, honestly, part of it is the price of gas, but also part of it is that as coaches change and as teams change, we don't mandate transportation. So if you want to take your team, Dr. Chesney, to Novi, here are your options. You can tell your kids, be at the field at 4 o'clock, okay? And then we take no liability, no responsibility on that. I call it i.e. the Little League model, be at the field at 4 o'clock. Or, John, we need a bus because it's tough for my parents to get their kids there, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll do a one-way drop, and then parents will bring back. Or, John, I want my team dropped and I want them brought home. So it fluctuates from year to year, team to team, depending on a lot of those variables. The only sport that's round-tripped consistently over the history of time has been football. So the coaches look to try and help the parents out because that's an add-on to your pay to participate where we can. So if we're going to the west side of the state, we're going to probably make different travel arrangements than if we're going to Howe.
Do we reimburse, like if there's, a minivan with 6 people in it, do we reimburse for mileage if they're taking members of a team, or do we not do that?
We really don't do that. We try not to get into that
Okay.
personal transportation of students business.
Okay.
If we reimburse, we'd own the liability if they crashed.
Do the coaches give you a schedule before the transportation fee is charged to the student, so you know ahead of time?
Yep.
What games you need to transport for?
Yes.
What
So if we go to, that's not the slide we wanted. We'll come back to that. So what your question is, if you look in your packet, you'll see one of our pay to participate contracts. So here's how it works. We build a schedule. Some are built a year out. Some are built 5 months out. So the coaches get their schedule a month or two before their season. They grab their bus forms. If they want transportation, they fill them out. Round trip for this one-way drop, don't need a bus, whatever it is. We take those bus forms in. My secretary does the calculation. Then we get the roster, at tryout time or by first practice time. We take the number of kids, we divide it into that number, and bang. So the form in yours happens to be this spring's baseball, pay to pay to participate was $75, our transportation fee was $35, so the total check for the parent was $210. So that gets sent out, gets returned to the coach, we collect that money, we deposit that money, put it in the general fund.
What is the cost for transportation? How is that calculated?
It's, and I don't have the specifics, but I can tell you how it's calculated. It's driver time.
Hourly rate.
It's hourly rate by the driver, and it's mileage,
So
i.e. gas.
So we own the buses, so we don't pay for use or wear and tear on the buses, but we pay for driver time and mileage.
And layover if they wait and bring them home.
Yep.
There's a different rate for layover time.
But that's all in regards to the drivers.
Correct.
And gas.
And the drivers have different salaries for different times?
No, when they pick a trip, it's a consistent salary level.
Okay.
So they do their trips by a bid process. So every week they would sit down with our transportation director and they bid these jobs on a board. That's how they cover
So
it.
typically, what's the cost to go from here to Flint on a bus, John, for a football game?
Okay. I'm going to guesstimate probably for one bus, you're probably about $375 for a round trip, 2-hour contest. So remember, we're leaving. Typically, we want to arrive on site a half hour to 45 minutes ahead, plus your travel time, 2 hours for the event, and then travel time back is what we would be booking. And then obviously, that's what the driver's expenses, plus the mileage rate that we get from the LESA, which encompasses their gas.
What do those drivers get paid to go there?
Got to be honest with you, I don't know that. I can get it for you.
Great. You know?
I think it's 20-something, somewhere around that an hour. And then layover time's lower.
I'll give you an example that, it's like, and I may be wrong with where you're trying to go. Is our cost for school bus drivers and school buses good or bad? I'm not sure if that's your question or not. But so when we do transportation, and I take, I take your add-on fee. So basically, I've given you my word that we're going to transport your kid, whether it was a one-way drop or round trip or whatever. If transportation can't cover that trip, we still cover it. So when you see charters picking up teams in Brighton and taking them places, it's because we can't cover that transportation. Right now, if we wanted to transport all of our teams, we would not be able to do it because we do not have enough drivers to be able to still make run times for our secondary and our elementary kids. So, but if we take your money, we will keep our word and we will do that. And that cost is typically about a third higher to go out into the private sector. And
we have field trips right now that we take buses out on too.
So then again, back to my question, you're saying it's about $375 to take a team up to Flint and back,
I'm just guessing off the top of my head.
and that includes mileage and the bus driver's salary. And those are the only two things we're paying for?
Pretty much.
Nothing else?
It's a direct bill that we get from LESA. So it comes through our transportation.
Let me ask you, is that like overtime for the bus driver, or are they on salary, they on
Could be.
hourly?
No, they're not on salary.
So that's an hourly rate that they get?
It's bargained into their contract. And their hourly rate for when they sit there watching the event or waiting for the kids on a round trip is a different rate. It's a little lower.
Sure.
And that's fine when a teacher takes a field trip someplace.
Correct.
You get the bill.
They just bill you later.
So the only other form that I did not, that's not in the PowerPoint that is in your packet, and this is available on the internet at our website, is our pay to participate numbers. Okay, so what we charge depending on the sport that you play. So when you are asking questions about unfunded sports, about indirect costs, those type of things, you can see those tiers. So the mainstream sports that have been around forever are at the $175 tier for the first and second sport. We comp the third sport. Like I said, we have 27 kids in the high school that play 3 sports. So most of your revenue, quite honestly, is tied up in one-time participations. You look at the lacrosse, rugby, and JV Pom that use school facilities, they're at the $100 rate. Same story in terms of 2 season and third season free. The bowling, equestrian, gymnastics, hockey, and ski programs, they are at the lowest high school tier at $75 because they have off-site facility expenses that are pretty dramatic, especially for equestrian and hockey. And ski's not cheap either. And then there's our middle school rate, which is $100 a pop. So those are the tiers.
Here's a crazy question for you. So if you have a girl that does JV pom, girls lacrosse, so that's $200 hits. Then she plays a third sport that's at the higher tier, what happens?
We'd comp it.
We comp it anyway, okay.
You know, honestly,
Curious.
yeah. No, we'd comp it.
There's so few.
There's so few, and you know what? God bless. I'd love to encourage that multi-sport participation. I think it's great for kids. It saddens me that we move away from it. You know, the only other question that any board members have asked me is about the caps on our pay to participate. So if you look at the bottom, we have some cap language on our form. So the question asked of me was how many families actually cap out? Honestly, probably maybe 3 to 6 a year ever cap out. Because it's located by building, as opposed to 7 through 12. And so we have very few families that ever reach the cap.
Did you say the coaches are responsible to collect the pay-to-play money?
We've done it 2 ways. Historically, and the most productive way, we kind of learned our lesson this fall, was yes, we produce the contracts, we give them to the coaches. Coaches give them to the kids and say, I need them back by this date. And they come back, not 100% of them, but, and then the coaches will nag and say, hey, I really need this back. You know, if there's an issue, come, you know, have your folks call me or have them call Mr. Thompson. And honestly, that method has been our most productive. We did venture into the online world this fall, and it wasn't overly well received, even though I pretty much took a hard line and said, this is what we are doing. There's a fee associated for that when you use your credit card. People weren't wild about that. People
My wife yelled at me about that.
worried about cybersecurity rather. And on our end, what we did take that hard line, quite honestly, we still took checks too. So we were running duplicate systems. The online tracking, as opposed to getting my 15 basketball players' contracts back from the varsity basketball team versus the online tracking mechanism, was very cumbersome. And quite honestly, and people in this room may have gotten a letter or 2 or 3 or 4 from me because we were way off target. And I've been doing this a long time. I know what that number should be about. It fluctuates. There's no way coming out of fall and then coming out of winter we should have been where we were at. And it's because, honestly, people didn't pay. And so being able to follow up on that was much harder. So this spring, we went back to paper.
So ultimately, you're responsible to collect them, to collect the fee at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, yes.
Give the coaches an opportunity, and if they can't, it comes back to you, and then it's up to you to get it.
Yeah. We have a number of things that we have a checkoff list. I mean, it's pay to participate, it's physical. We need the emergency card. We've got a number of things that have to get done for us to be able to start a season. So we track all that, and Vicki works with the coaches, and then usually I'm the bad guy. After she hasn't gotten X, Y, or Z in a timely manner, or we're still missing a percentage or something, she will tell me, and then I will pick up the phone and do what I do, and magically we will get our emergency cards or our pay to participate in, or what may be the issue.
Yeah, the soccer team, I think, when my son played, right after tryouts and the team was picked, boom, they're all in the gym, handing out uniforms. They did all of this, make sure all the emergency cards. I mean, they probably had, 90% of their stuff.
Well, we have physicals next week.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's, however the coach does it, increases the efficiency or not of it.
So I have a question. I've taught, it's somewhat, well, it's very related, but I've taught summer camps for a number of years. And when we had these camps at zero cost, we'd have a high percentage of people sign up and a low percentage show up because there was no cost associated, no penalty associated with it. when we charged $50 per person with scholarships available to anybody who requested them, then we had the same amount of people sign up, but a lot higher percentage of people show up, because there was this, basically a little bit of a sting associated with not showing up to the tune of $50. And do we have any experience in that, or, any numbers associated with that, or we've never worked on that model before?
No, it's a fair question. About the only sport where we've messed around with that, not to a large extent, is with golf. Okay, so if I want to be on the golf team, and we know we've got 5 days of tryouts at Oak Point, that's a pretty good gig to get to play 10 hours of free golf. At a pretty nice country club. So have we put a fee in place for tryouts to kind of counter, okay, who's really serious about the golf team and who's looking for free golf? Yeah, but aside from that, no, we have not. I mean, we run in our summer camp model, obviously. All of our summer camps are a little bit more akin to what you were talking about in terms of cost.
Yeah, can you put up the pay to participate in the brief history? That one shows that. Please.
Is that the one you were looking for, Mr. Conley?
Yes, thank you. Before I get started, what I see here, I want to thank you for doing a nice job where it's an understandable system, because that is, when you're not doing it every day, hard sometimes. And this is very, as you've presented it, I'm very pleased, so thank you.
Fun.
Okay. What I see here is the district, when it's going into deficit and handing out and awarding very high wages before your time. What year did you start in Brighton? 3? Right there. Okay, so in that, but I see it somewhere in there. Okay, so it ran almost 10 years without pay to play, and then all of a sudden, when we start overspending our general fund, here comes pay to play. Now, I saw, and I was present during the system that was in place and the contracts that basically put us in deficit during that time. Now, I'm going to go back to Dr. Chesney and his graph and how he graphs things. So now, here we weren't in a deficit. We had a $4 million fund equity approximately, give or take, and we were able to cover a lot of this stuff. And then we grew a district because we had not enough kids, or we had whatever happened. And we created a deficit budget, which then we started cranking the expenses back to the taxpayers. All right? It seems to be running parallel. So now I would support that we're on a parallel coming out of it.
It typically charts with declining enrollment. If you look at declining enrollment, which started in 2003, and there was no adjustment to the expenditures, there was an increase in expenditures, so I'm agreeing.
Yeah.
So when there was a paying down of fund equity, pay to play goes up. When fund equity goes up, pay to play goes away. It's all cyclical, and it's happened since '94.
And seeing that though, and seeing that curve, so like again,
No, you're accurate. I mean,
I wouldn't have seen it.
2005, 2006 enhancements, reduction, impact statements.
Yep.
We dealt with what we had to deal with during those years as best we could. So,
Right. And again, though, the board, not me, but at the time, they made some choices that created the system that created, we charged the taxpayers more that were already paying their taxes. At one time, had all these things fully covered. I would suggest that as we go forward, that we go back to the system prior to our deficit spending model, because we're not on a deficit spending model anymore, and that's where this comes in and why you're here tonight to present, so we get our opinions, so our facts are straight. So this helps me even more confirm that we're heading the right direction with our district. We're heading in a situation that at one time our district fully funded it, and then busing came in, or the transportation fee came in. I would suggest that should be funded also at a point. Maybe not this time.
Sure.
Okay, I would suggest that it should be funded, and that's just my opinion.
I remember, I had one board member ask me, well, what's mandated by the state for a school system?
Sports, nothing, correct?
The only thing mandated are the 18 credits that we teach. Transportation is not mandated. It's not even in the state constitution, but we provide it. Athletics isn't mandated. The thing we hope you pass tonight it's for future action, but MHSA, that's not even a state organization. That's a separate entity that all the schools participate in. So athletics isn't mandated, but school systems over time have evolved in the different areas with fine arts, musicals, those types of things. But I think the question that I had, I can't remember who asked me, was, well, what is mandated? 18 credits. 18 of the 24 credits are mandated, and then we get to choose beyond that as an organization what we offer to round people out to their 24 credits to graduate from high school. Below that, there are very few curricular mandates in relation to the state because there aren't credits attached to it. But none of the stuff we're talking about tonight, nothing in John's presentation was very good, but none of this was ever mandated by the state for the school system to offer. It's just something we've always chose to do.
Do any school districts not participate in sports?
Jeez, yeah.
Yes.
Couple.
Many.
And most schools choose what sports they're going to participate in. So in my former district, we didn't have 99 athletic teams or 100 athletic teams or whatever. They pick and choose, and it's usually based on interest. It's usually based on finances of the city, and it's based on facilities. So if you don't have a pool, probably not going to have a swim team. Okay? If you don't have multiple fields, it's hard to run lacrosse as well, because they eat up a lot of field time, just like soccer, just like very few schools have rugby, bowling. All those different things, I think, are locally decided upon, and should be. That's the way it should be.
I'm impressed with the sports program, so I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Sorry.
Stop me if I shouldn't do this. There's another part to this, and that's everything else that we offer at Brighton. And I don't know that John can speak about that, but I would like maybe if we could have someone pick it. I'm familiar with band, because my kids were involved. Maybe we can find out how that operates as well, because I think ultimately that's a community issue. When they hear sports are being taken care of, what about us? I mean, from what I've deducted myself and speaking with the people that know, pay to play seems to be a sports only thing, but fees are across the board. Everyone pays fees, including the people in sports, because they have fees above and beyond the pay to play. Now, I'd like some clarification and maybe some other people's opinions on that, because it is an issue, because that's what always comes up at our meetings. If we're talking about pay to play, someone will say, well, if you're going to get rid of that for them, then I want it to be out of band. And I'm not aware of a pay to play for band. I do know they have fees. And everything we offer at Brighton has a different fee associated with it. Just as John was explaining, there's tiers, really.
I would say at one time or another, all this stuff was new. So back in the day, schools taught math, English, social studies, and science. That's what they taught. And then everybody went home and worked on the farm. That was why we're still on the agrarian calendar today. Why do we have summer off? We have summer off because the kids typically worked on the farm. So we still have that. But everything else that's been added, and I have a sheet that shows, I think there's 43 items that have been added to what schools did since the inception of schools, has been added fee-based typically. Because originally the funding was for math, science, English, and social studies, because we were supposed to educate, and all the other stuff was ancillary. Now, all the other stuff for local communities is extremely important. It's how they define themselves. Not as many people come to a science class as they come to a Friday night football game, but it is what it is. And yeah, I think what you have to do is look at the history, honor the history, and then continue to move forward.
But I'd like to go back to Ken's point, because I would agree with him in the fact that the pay-to-play comes in front of the board. For some reason, we're voting on this, we're changing fees, we're eliminating whatever. But these other fees, they never come to us. Somebody just makes up the fee and that's what they charge, and that's, I guess, history, right? We don't see any of that stuff.
Nope.
I mean, the musical fee, who decides? It's not the board that said they gotta pay $75 to participate.
Well, pay to play never came to you either. The only time pay to play came to you was when somebody wanted to eliminate it. We never voted on it on a year-to-year basis.
So why are we voting to eliminate that, or why would we?
Because the previous board brought it up and made a motion to eliminate. And so that's when it ended up on the agenda. and that's when it was discussed. But from year to year to year, the only thing sports-wise that comes in front of you is the reapplication to the MHSA.
So if somebody said they wanted to eliminate the drama fee up here as the board.
And you guys made a motion, and you had 4 people that agreed, then it would go away.
Which is the reason that we need strategy rather than bringing up items one at a time.
And will be addressed later tonight.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Tom? No? No?
Thanks, John.
Thanks. If you
so
have
much.
follow-up
That was a
questions, feel
great
free to give me a holler.
That's all we have.
Okay, so now we move on to our 4 action items. First item is the minutes of May 11th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of May 11th?
So moved? Support?
We have a motion and support. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
A couple of questions and a couple of clarifications. A question related to 9G. Well, that's a correction, actually. 9G has board review. So that's just a small typo. Clarification that I'd like to ask for, and this will come in later when we talk about resolution LESA board election. But item F is a little bit unclear. And I just want to make sure that that is just rock solid clear as to what that means and to what we decided and how we decided. You know, we had a discussion, we talked about who would be the representatives from the Brighton Area School Board to the LESA election. This kind of says that, but I just want to make sure that we're absolutely clear as to who is going to be representing, who's the designate, who's the alternate, whether we need to vote on that, and just that we're absolutely following due process on this. And do we feel that process has been followed for that particular item?
Yes.
And that it reflects it?
In fact, it even says it now in the board packet that you're the designee, right?
Yes.
For this current board packet, it says you're the designee and Beth Minor's the backup designee.
Alternate.
You can't make it.
Right.
Right?
So do we need to vote on that in terms of deciding, or is that by resolution we're fine with that?
Yeah, that was
That
a
was by
consensus.
consensus.
And the fact that it's brought forward to the agenda, the language that it's presented indicates that it was a consensus since it made it to the agenda.
Okay. Can we say then in these minutes that by consensus, Dave Chesney will be the designate and Beth Minor will be the alternate? As decided at the Tuesday, May 20, or as the May 11th meeting to represent Brighton Area Schools Board of Education at the LASA meeting on June 1st.
Yep, all that. Any other, all right, so we have an amendment to the minutes.
Jay, let me ask you one thing before we do this. There's a lot of things we got to get through tonight, all the way down to Old.
Yes, yes.
Just something that we can group on these and do them in a group.
For example, the handbook revisions.
I mean, A through, I mean,
Well, I think we can start moving through
D,
them pretty quick.
I mean, E through whatever. I mean,
I can blow through them pretty
Yeah,
quick.
we can go
so.
through them pretty quick if we, it's all up to us and the level of discussion we want to bring. I think we owe it to the constituents and the people here to go through the process item by item.
Yep. I've got one more correction.
One more correction.
Yep, and 10B. Chesney commented that while defining financial strategies, the board should consider practice in the best interest of all students and prioritize curriculum, hold debt, and emergency fund.
Would you go
Okay.
over that one more time?
Sure. So just under financial strategy, Dr. Chesney commented that while defining financial strategies, the board should consider practice in the best interest of all students and prioritize curriculum, old debt, and emergency funding for emergencies.
So you're getting rid of influencing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and adding the prioritization of curriculum, old debt, and emergencies.
Okay. Any other discussion?
yeah. Shouldn't we, or isn't the process that we review these, we send these comments to Star, she makes the revisions? Isn't that how it's done typically?
I think we've done it a couple different ways. I mean, yeah.
That's the way you prefer, though?
You know what? This is fine, or are you not fine with him making corrections?
No, I don't have a problem here, but just the time, because we get
Process.
these, right,
Oh, okay.
exactly.
So maybe when you get them on Thursdays, you see a
That's my
correction.
point.
Okay.
Send them to,
Right.
copy all the board members, send them to Star,
Exactly.
so we all know, and then when we get the thing approved, we're all kind of
Oh.
good.
Does everyone get each stroke?
You're in charge.
I'm not in charge. He says is Mr. Conley. Okay. So we're good now. All right, so we have we need a motion to approve the amended minutes.
So moved?
Okay,
Support?
support, so it's items 9, F and G, and number 10B for the discussion. Any other discussion on the approval of the amended minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next up, handbook revisions.
I have not received any questions or comments about the BHS handbook revisions, so we would recommend that you accept them.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Support. Motion and support, any discussion?
No, those were changed. I mean, the things I had questions
Right,
about.
we're changed? Okay.
Yes.
No more discussion, we have a motion and a support. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 6-0. Scranton handbook.
Same on the Scranton handbook, so we'd recommend again that you pass this.
Do we have a motion to approve? Motion to approve. We have a motion, we have support?
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion on the Scranton handbook? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next up is the original budget.
I had about 5 questions from a board member that went to Dr. Gistinger. She has answered those questions, and I haven't had any others since, so we would recommend you pass this budget.
All right, do we have a motion to pass the 2015-16 original budget as presented?
So moved.
Go ahead, support. We have a motion and support. Any discussion?
Just one comment is that I'm happy to see that one of the things that we're taking care of in this is under Function 511, retirement of old debt, that we are getting rid of some of the energy bond debt that we have, so some old debt to the tune of $507,000, which is a excellent move in the right direction financially for our school district.
We have also set up that capital outlay account as well.
Perfect. All right, thank you. So we have a motion, we have support. No further discussion. All in favor of passing the 2015-16 original budget as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next up, student nutrition and lunch fees.
We recommend you pass the increased lunch prices at 25 cents BHS and SMS from $2.50 to $3.25, $2.75 to $3.50, as we discussed last time.
Do I have a motion to approve the student nutrition lunch fees?
So moved.
Support. We have a motion and support. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of supporting the 2016 going forward? 16 going forward?
Yep.
Student nutrition lunch fee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next item up, Brighton Center for Performing Arts projector screen.
We recommend you accept the bid of $5,909.22 submitted by E21 Design.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. We have a motion and support from Mr. Trombley. Any discussion on this?
Just to clarify, this was not a sealed bid that Maria said.
It was under the threshold for sealed bid. It was actually go out and get the actual bids.
Any other discussion? Mr. Conley?
Was it the low bid?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion, we have support, no further discussion. All in favor of passing the Brighton Center for Performing Arts screen projector purchase signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next one up, Arrow Hive wireless access ports.
Per board policy 6320 purchasing, we recommend that you guys accept the quote from Amerinet for the acquisition, licensing, and installation of 8 additional Wi-Fi access points at Brighton High School for $7,589.30.
We have a motion to approve the wireless access ports.
So moved.
A motion
Support.
and support. Any discussion?
One question, is that for better Wi-Fi.
Coverage.
Coverage
Correct.
in the high school? Is their Wi-Fi coverage good for all the other schools?
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Nick's here tonight if we have any specific questions, but my understanding is yes.
Okay.
So this is out of the bond.
Tech bond,
Tech bond.
correct.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? No? All in favor of the AeroHive wireless access point purchase signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 6-0. Chromebook purchase for the bridge.
Again, per board policy 6320, we recommend using the REMC TRIG contract price and recommend that we purchase 40 Chromebooks and 40 management licenses in addition to 2 storage carts for the bridge for a total of $13,987.58, again, out of the bond.
Motion approved.
Support.
We have a motion, we have support. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of the purchase of Chromebooks for the bridge signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I see none. That passes 6-0.
I have
Next
a
item
question
up.
before we move on to the next item. And it's related to the resolution LESA board election. And this is, I found when we were electing board officers for the board up here, it was a little bit confusing in that we could vote multiple times for officers at this election. So for the board resolution, what is the specific process that we need to follow?
I think it would be the same as you did before in terms of a discussion, nominations, and then consensus.
We need a motion?
I don't think you need a motion.
You don't need a motion.
You need it's a consensus. So you're
It's a
not
consensus.
voting.
You're not actually voting on it.
Right.
You're going to tell your designate who you want to vote for. That's what you're going to do. Then your designate goes and votes. Now, Howell voted, as you read about in the paper, so if you want to be specific about it, I would say cast a vote. That's the consensus building you're doing anyway.
Which would be a motion.
I would strongly suggest that we have a vote on this.
I think if you want it as clean as possible, I would agree.
Okay, do we have a motion to put on the table for this item?
I would like to move that we nominate and support Julie Hill for the LESA board seat.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have support?
Support.
Motion, support. Now it's time for open discussion on this. Do we have any discussion?
Let me tell you the reason that I nominated Julie Hill. She has been on the LESA board since 2004. 5 of those years have been as board president. She's had 25 years total of school board experience. She's highly experienced. She's been on the board. She's interested in staying involved. And I would also like to bring up that it's a 5-member board. And it's historically, the members of the board, there is 1 member from each constituent school district. And Brighton already has a member. It's the current president is Mrs.
Luann Loy.
Luann Lloyd, who is the president of the LSA board. So we are duly represented, and typically, like I said, what happens is that each constituent school district is represented there, and that would, again, make Julie Hill the obvious candidate for this position.
She's from Heartland.
She is from Heartland. She represents Heartland and is seeking to be reelected to represent Heartland once again.
Didn't somebody send an email out on Heartland's email address for her, in support of her, which is against the law for political use on school emails, addresses?
I didn't see the email, but if you send me the email, I can check into it.
What's that?
Something in the newspaper about it, I saw.
I mean, I got an email from, but it was a Heartland school address in support of Julie Hill.
I didn't get that email.
I did not either.
I got hers. She sent one up to the board.
I got that one, and then I got a follow-up from, tell you who it is, but
Did not.
From Charlie, find the end of it.
you get it?
Yeah.
The Heartland School Board?
He doesn't
It's
say-
from the Heartland School
He
Board?
doesn't say what.
Well, it's Heartland School address. Heartland.
Right.
School.
I think it was addressed in paper, but I don't remember
Yeah.
what the answer was.
I don't know.
The board from Heartland decided, the Heartland board decided at their last board meeting to unanimously vote for Julie Hill, and there was no questions asked about any other candidate. We did talk about the email issue, and they decided as a group that it wasn't an issue. I have the minutes from the meeting they had.
I'm just,
Their website.
It's,
no, I get your point, but I mean, I don't know if, I think what he did was probably in violation.
correct. That's what I'm
I don't
saying.
think she did it.
No, she didn't. She
endorse,
she
but I-
sent it on a Comcast email.
Right.
But this was a Heartland school.
Heartland Schools got whatever it is.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Any other discussion, Mr. Conley?
When does our, for Brighton, when do we get to,
2 years.
2 years from, when did we do with the last one?
It's like a.
It's a 4-year term,
So it's 2 to go. on a
5-year
second.
term, 5-year term.
Yeah.
Five.
Actually, I think in the packet
7?
later on here, it does say, no, in the LESA.
So a question I have then,
Packet
each board then, even though when we sent our board member up, they get to approve them, board member.
So the, like Dr. Chesney said, the tradition has been 1 from each district, but the law is you can have 2 from one individual district.
It's an 8-year term. Elected. We're elected in 2001 through 2019.
It's a lifer.
Yeah, pretty much.
She has 2 more, our representative has 2 more on hers.
I remember, I do remember her election.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that Julie Hill has, I've attended the countywide school board dinner meetings that we have yearly, and Julie Hill has always attended. I've always seen her there. And at other meetings, she is always there.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion on the table? No other discussion? I'd like to get a roll call vote, please. Dar?
Okay, and this is to nominate Julie Hill.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Chesney?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Birchfield is absent. Mr. Conley?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Trombley?
No.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Meinert?
Yes.
Start, hang on a second. Maybe I
I
can't
don't,
do
you'd
that.
have to have a reason to abstain.
Okay, then I'm just, well, the reason is I don't know her. And the others, I'll just vote no.
Okay. So it's 4 yes, 2 no. The nomination for Julie Hill has passed for the LESA election next Monday, June 1st?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Right, unless something happens, and then
And Mrs.
our
Martin.
backup.
Go ahead.
Okay, you also need to make a motion for the, that's actually what we're voting on, is the designee and the alternate. If you look in the resolution, the board does hereby approve, so we actually need to vote.
Okay, so we need a motion to adopt the resolution designating the
Correct.
representatives.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Support.
We have support. All in favor of accepting the resolution and the designates as presented, signify by saying yes.
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 Those opposed, passes 6-0.
All right, so just
You have your marching orders.
to repeat, to be very, very clear. I'm the designate, Mrs. Minor is the alternate.
Correct.
On the first ballot, we are to vote for Mrs. Julie Hill.
Yes.
And if it comes to a second ballot, then you vote your conscience. But no elections have ever gone to a second ballot at the LESA. But,
That is correct.
okay. Okay,
And Mrs. Meinert will be signing the resolution stating that tonight.
yes, correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That was complicated. More than it probably needed to be, but that's okay. Next item up is item K, the Neola policies, the second reading.
Nope, we're gonna do the bond. Series 3 bonds.
Sorry, I scratched the wrong one out. Item J, resolution.
Yep.
Huh? I don't have my glasses on, so that'll be the same. Resolution 2015 School Building and Site Bond Series 3. Dr. Gray.
We just need a motion, we just need you to adopt the resolution so that we can continue the paperwork and go to St. Louis in July and sell these bonds.
All right. Do we have a motion to support the resolution for the building and site box Series 3? Motion to support. We have a motion to support by Mr. Conley. Any discussion on this? No discussion. All,
It's a
roll call vote.
Mrs. Minor?
Yes.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes?
Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Birchfield is absent. Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Chesney?
Yes.
That passes 6-0. All right, now on to the Neola policy, second reading. Dr. Gray.
I haven't had any questions. I did have, just a clarification, I did have somebody ask me to give a brief overview. Was that of the for action or the for future tonight?
For future.
For future, okay. Then we recommend that you accept all the policies tonight.
All right, do we have a motion to accept the Neola policies as presented?
So moved.
Support.
We have a motion to support. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. Next item up, monthly financial statement, April 2015.
Dr. Gistinger could not be here tonight because of a death in the family, but she told me that everything's good to go and she'll amend the budget when she gets back on Monday. And we are looking like we are tracking well.
Okay. So we'll probably see an amended budget.
First meeting in June.
Gotcha. All right. We have a motion to accept the monthly financial statement as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Support.
Support down here. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of accepting the financial statement for April 2015 signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? I see none. That passes 6-0. One of our favorites now is the monthly deficit elimination plan.
She's winding down, so again, we recommend you accept the deficit elimination plan. It's part of our process. We have to comply with the state, and hopefully I won't have to say that here in the very near future.
We have a motion.
Motion moved. Support.
We have a motion, Mr. Chesney, support with Mr. Conley. Any discussion? One, go ahead, Mr. Conley.
Just a little one. This is virtually identical to the one we had last month, correct?
Correct.
And we're tracking in our projection, did we have the elimination of pay-to-play in this projection?
You're talking about the deficit elimination plan this year. We had pay to play in next year's
Next
budget.
plan, right, I didn't think so.
So two different things.
That's correct, thank you. So this amount doesn't really reflect.
Does not reflect anything in relation to pay to play.
Fine. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All in favor of accepting the deficit elimination plan for April 2015 as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 6-0. All right, the approval of the 2015-16 LESA budget.
We recommend you accept the 2015-16 LASA budget, and one interesting note is they have a fund equity spend down, which will net us, if we split it, over 2 years we can do that, or if we take it in a lump sum, about $385,000. So we're thinking we're going to take it this budget instead of waiting until next budget cycle. And if that's the consensus, because I see a lot of nodding heads, then that's what we'll do.
Take it when it's offered. All right, do we have a motion to accept the LESA budget resolution as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have support. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of accepting the LESA budget resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? I see none. That passes 6-0. Next item up is O, the L4029 approval.
Just the property tax sheet that once we get it, we have to bring before you each time, and it has to go for action. This never goes for future and then for action.
Okay. And that's at our place, right? Yeah. That's our property tax request.
Yeah, there's nothing we can really do with this. We just get the document and we bring it to you for approval.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the L4029 report tax request as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion. Support. We have support. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Passes 6-0. Hey, Mr. Trombley, we got through that pretty quick. All right, for future action, Neola policies, first reading, Dr. Gray.
Okay, if you go through the policies themselves and look for future action, everything that you see in bold is recommended by the attorneys at Neola Policies. So as you go through and you're looking for what has changed, everything in bold has changed. When it's in bold, we have no choice. These are mandates that come through state law, and they typically are preceded by a strike-through. And the strike-through was the old language that became, unnecessary or illegal based on a court case, and the new language is what's in compliance. Usually when you see MCL after it, that's the actual Michigan law that it's in compliance with. If you look at the entrance age, most of the bolding has to do with the pushback of the start date to the September 1st, and there's just some clarifying language in relation to that. If you look at foreign exchange students, there's been some different court cases and questions in terms of visas and in terms of foreign exchange students that are staying with relatives or staying with host families. So that's what the bold language pretty much dictates. The choices we have when you see an X through it is the choice that we make in recommendation to our district. For instance, we only have one high school. So you'll see in the district high school as opposed to in a district high school if we were a larger district that had multiple high schools. You see that carried throughout. If you look at immunization, we've talked, I think at this table, but district-wide especially, immunizations have changed. Now there's a big issue going on right now where if you're not immunized, we actually have to withhold you from school up to a 3-week period. For those people that want to opt out of that because there's still an opportunity to do so, you have to go and get educated and get a sign-off waiver sheet either from your doctor or the people doing the actual education of it. Our nurses all over this. We've actually reached out to those people that presently, I think there's about 100 in the county, and we have some in the district that have opt-outs, and we have made numerous contacts with them to make sure that we don't have to exclude anybody from school. Graduation requirements, this is primarily in relation to personal curriculum. We comply with this presently. We make sure that everybody understands they can have a personal curriculum, and beyond that, we don't do much with it. They sometimes ask us for a personal curriculum. We've done a lot with online and personal curriculums, so this is not a new thing to our parents. In terms of animals on district property, this primarily speaks to service animals, and even beyond that, it speaks to the people that handle service animals. Let's say we had a service animal that's accompanied by an adult. That adult would also have to be run through our fingerprint and iChat screening process, especially if they're going to ride the bus or be in different situations where they have access to kids. And it defines service or non-service animals. And again, we are presently in compliance with these particular things. When it comes down to who handles this, you see we've selected the principal and the transportation director because they deal with these issues more often than anybody else. In terms of 1100, if you see on page 272 of this packet, this has just become obsolete. So this is no longer part of our board policy. And that pretty much sums up what these are.
Okay, so if anybody has any specific questions between now and our next meeting, you can address them to Dr. Gray.
Just one quick question.
Yep.
Questions now, too. So, that wasn't my
You talked about what bold means, or what that
Yep.
means, but when there's a handwritten text,
I write it.
that's your writing.
Yep, that's my recommendation based on Neola attorneys and our consultant.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gray.
I write it just to make it like layman's terms, so I can get it, because they give me all this jargon. I said, what does it really mean? And so I write that down.
All right. Thank you. All right, next up, MH.
We spoke about this earlier. It's our annual association membership resolution. We'll be asking you to vote for action on that in June.
Questions on that? Discussion? Okay. C, handbook revisions, elementary school.
Again, if there are any questions, please direct them to me, and we'll find answers. Or Jack's here as well. I'd hate to steal his thunder. He sat through the sweat box for the entire meeting. If you want to fire questions at Jack, have at it.
Good evening, everyone. Yep, we pretty much cleaned up. The elementary principals got together and looked at the handbook that hadn't been revised since 2009. So it is online. It's been online in all the elementary's websites, but we decided we need to go through that and make some changes, more or less updates. There hasn't been a whole lot of changes to the code of conduct or anything like that, but the strike-throughs are deletes and underline is new language or just the updated language. That's pretty much it.
Any questions? Minor?
Yeah, I found it at one time, I can't find it here, but under money and value, you list iPads, computer games, calculators. Where do you have phones listed?
The phones, I believe, let's see. Go to page 12. I think we had that right under there and being deleted because it really isn't too much of an issue in the elementary, but there is language that was struck out, and that was talked about for elementary principals.
Okay, I was in an elementary today, and there was a phone issue.
There was.
Yeah. So, of somebody bringing her parents' phone in.
Okay.
Do we want to include that?
We could go to that strike through and continue on, has cell phone, has pagers, other personal communication devices. It does talk about board policy. If we want to leave that in there, that would be fine. It was just a suggestion from one of the other principals. Would you like to do that?
But the language says, just so I'm correct on this, they discourage it, right? It's not
Right.
with the caveats of it's got to be off, it has to.
And it does happen. Some of the upper grade students do bring cell phones. We hear them going off in their backpacks during the school day. They're not really allowed to carry them around. They have an emergency at the end of the day, but we usually take care of that in the office. If there's problems, they need to call home, things like that.
Money, valuable equipment such as iPads.
I think it's a piece of valuable equipment.
Okay.
That somebody else could get a hold of.
Yeah, so you struck out radios, you added iPads, maybe you add phones.
Cell phones to that part of it? Okay. Okay, we can do that.
Any other questions? No other questions?
And it? Okay, thank you.
Next item up is D, pay to play. So what we did last time is there was a resolution to eliminate pay to play in our last meeting, and the board voted 4-3 to not eliminate or not overturn the elimination of pay to play.
That's correct.
Therefore, keeping July 1st end of pay to play in place. Right? Let's make sure I'm getting my language correct. I know this is going to be very important as we move forward. So what we talked about at the end of that meeting was throwing some ideas, some compromises, some changes to the language, for example, moving it one day or things of that nature to Dr. Gray, and then have a discussion tonight to see if we have something that we can put on the agenda for our next meeting in 2 weeks and hopefully resolve this issue, at least for the short term, in the satisfaction of the board and our constituents and the schools in general. So,
I got two
okay.
comments, actually. If you want me to
Go
report.
ahead.
Or I got one from Dr. Chesney and one from Mrs. Minor. And I don't know, they can say them. I don't have to read them.
So mine was the compromise and moving it from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2017. That was my suggestion. And Mrs. Minor came up with a much more reasonable idea.
I came up with a compromise because there's some schisms in the community, I guess I'll say, about pay to play, about what Mr. Stahl talked about too, about what about the other groups, the academic groups. And so the thought for my motion, I won't make it just yet, is to charge the BHS and Scranton athletes 50% of the current athletic pay to participate fee, to make it simple, eliminate the athletic transportation fee for next year, so that we as a board have time to talk about other programs, other academic issues, other fees, because we haven't had time to talk about that. That was coming up in our next board workshop, which is June 18th. And that's just the beginning of that. I've run this by the Hawkins PTO and kind of got their consensus before I brought it here.
Okay, can I summarize it then?
You may.
Eliminate the transportation fees starting the 1st of July this year.
Yes.
And then have the fees for participation, but still keep the multiple sport tack-ons for the second sport. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes,
Okay.
but cut it to 50%.
Cut it 50%.
For 1 year to give us time.
Right.
Two questions.
Two questions.
When you talk about transportation, is that for all sports and clubs?
Clubs meaning,
Science Olympiad.
These other groups?
No.
We couldn't do it with us.
I mean, when I talk about clubs, I'm talking about like the sports teams that aren't recognized,
Unfunded.
unfunded.
yes, yes.
For all.
Yeah. Anybody that pays the fee, the current, you had your tiers, anybody that pays in with the transportation fee or not,
Okay.
that's what we'd be eliminating.
All right. And then the next thing is, I'd be happy with that if we could line item that money that we collect, and we put it in a separate line item for future use, and it doesn't go into the general fund.
I don't know if we can do that.
You can. Now, we could, within the general fund, we could identify that. I think that's what you're asking anyways.
Okay.
But Gatsby rules don't allow us to keep the athletic budget separate any longer. So we got to bring the athletic money in. I think what we could do, though, is we could say 50% of it equated to $100,000. Here in the general fund is where we allocate this $100,000. So we could do that.
Keep track of it. Keep track
For
of
sure.
numbers.
And
Really,
we
you're just-
can
you're
go
picking a
to that
number.
extent To use that money as voted on by the board.
For something in the future.
Because here's the thing.
Well, you would, though. You would under a budget.
Right.
So you're going to vote for it under a budget anyway.
But at the end of the day, instead of rehashing this again next year, and I'm all for trying to figure out what the right language is, let's put this thing to bed once and for all. It's like every year it comes up in some shape or form, and let's just do it and be done with it somehow.
I don't disagree, but I think the intent is we would like to eliminate it completely. For some people. I mean, I even.
Yeah, I would. That's why I voted.
But I think what Ms. Meinert is alluding to is we need to address all the other things that collect fees and make sure we have a cohesive strategy. So maybe as a placeholder, cut the fees 50%, and hopefully by next budget year in 12 months, we'll have a very good idea how we tackle all of those and eliminate, and reallocate, and do whatever.
Jay, and then the sidebar to that would be, in my opinion, is that we take the money we were gonna cut 100% and spread it across all those other fees. And take the $225,000 and still give it back to the district in another fashion. It's cyclical, because I'm thinking that in the transportation, what about choir? What about, I saw a lot of funded pay-to-plays that we didn't have anything, that we didn't have expenses for. Okay, we see all those monies, and it helps what's happened. And I'm going to go back to the contract. It's this issue of when the funds weren't available, they went in other accounts, the students lose those privileges. So I'm all in on choir, drama.
But I think what you said is allocate the money that we saved, and we really can't.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about if we don't want to give the full 100%,
Right.
but we have funds that we're kind of thinking, for me, I'd rather just give the 100% and then go to the other ones too.
I'm with you.
Okay, hang on for a second. Okay, so, but if we're not willing to do that at this time, because, and I trust Beth's wisdom on this too, I agree with if we can get transportation covered, if we, I hear the buses come back empty because parents pick their kids up.
Yep.
There's a lot of things going on with transportation that we need to look at. They're coming back with kids on them.
I don't agree.
They go back, we need the buses coming home. Okay, so that's fine. But back to the thing, we need to get this back to the students, one fashion or another, and I support Mr. Stahl's idea. What else is where the kids paying, listen to other presentations, understand what it's costing. But, for instance, we did our Science Olympiad competition, there were other schools came in buses. We all carpooled up there as parents, got our kids there, and it went fine. There were no problems. They actually went really good. But I'd like to see those opportunities.
I think Mr. Trombley is saying exactly what you're saying. Maybe. We're going to cut, for round numbers, it's currently $200,000 we collect.
We're going to collect $100,000.
So we're going to collect $100,000.
I'm going to identify it, and you guys are going to tell me how to spend it.
Right, we can then do what we want with that $100,000 as a board through votes or the budget process or amendments or however we want to tackle it. But I think that's what you're saying, is the money that we're going to collect will be earmarked to do other things with. It's not just going to flow into the general budget and be gone.
But we need to have the discussion as the board
Going forward.
going forward and not just kind of pick and choose. I mean, we
Right.
all have to talk about this and lay everything on the table.
And then look at all the other things.
I
that
think the
collect
rush to
fees.
do it was to get something
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
I don't think it was wrong. I still don't think it was wrong. So I still would be in the position, I'd still support that and the other. So I guess that's what the board has to decide. I think that the intention is correct.
Okay, so if I'm hearing everyone correctly, on a consensus basis of what we want to see on the next for action item, it would be reducing the pay-to-play fees by 50% starting July 1st, 2015, and eliminating transportation fees 100% on July 1st, 2015.
With that money,
With that, I don't know if you have to put that in the resolution, because I think that's a budgetary.
well, here's the other thing I would also like to add to that, then. Why not any other group or club or anybody else that wants to charge a fee has to come to the board and ask permission to charge that fee?
Well, I think that's what we're going to talk about at the next board sessions. We're going to talk about all those other fees and how they're allocated and how we're.
And what they pay.
And I think that's why, in a good conscience, not eliminating this now is probably a good idea, so we can have that discussion of, if we said just, let's eliminate it now, and then everybody else we eliminate it. We don't know what the value of that is. We don't know.
That's
what
right.
that is. So
Well,
we
and
need to
not
have
only that,
discussion.
those are just arbitrarily set.
Right. So we need to come back and go through that whole process. Well, maybe, I don't
Can
know.
I add one tab to this book? I like
Yeah.
everything. Could we add the tab about bringing these organizations in to discuss this, as just like we had John tonight? Because I'd like to maybe next board see that also. We might as well get on it right away.
What- Let me make a suggestion on it, is we're going to talk about it at the board strategy breakout session. Why don't we formulate a plan on who we want to see, what we want to see, and what we want them to show us, and then we can set that up with Dr. Gray, which works at the best, the administration.
How about the numbers? I mean, we don't, in that volume, it could be just the numbers, even per group.
Yeah.
Brought in on a sheet, here's the number,
Yeah.
here's the
Yeah.
number, and that could be.
And we could do that at the strategy meeting and then have that discussion.
I'm good with that. So why don't we just pass it tonight then?
Well, you didn't want to have something brought up
Yeah,
and
no,
then
we'll,
voted on.
yeah, we'll wait a week. We can
No,
still
that-
do it, but
that's not the case.
Let's make sure, I would like to make sure that the language is proper on the, for action item, that we get to look at it, we do it. It's not going to change the effects of next year's sports, because tryouts don't happen until after the 1st of July, right? So, I mean, there'll be no collection.
But again, as school of choice comes along and
Yeah.
those types of things, those are all marketable items.
Do you think that'll influence? I'm asking the people that influence school of choice.
I think state championships influence school of choice.
Okay. So, I mean, well, no, I think we can
It's
repeat. Yeah,
It's for future. It's for future action now. It'll be for action and voted on at the next.
And I think you wrote down so maybe read back what I think I said, and then we'll see if we kind of consent, and then it'll be on the next.
I added a word to that later, so.
You added a word to
Yes.
this? Okay, do you want to, how about if you read it and then I'll.
Okay. Motion to charge VHS and Scranton athletes 50% of the current athletic pay-to-participate fee and eliminate the athletic transportation fee for the 2015-16 school year commencing July 1st, 2015.
I believe that's.
No, nothing about earmark funds.
I don't think we can make a budget here.
Why don't we throw those in the minutes? Let's throw those in the board minutes.
I'm not sure if we can make a resolution for a particular. I don't know that for sure.
Well, I get you by,
Okay,
that
so
get
we
you by
have
the
kind of a
Gatsby.
consensus
the
nodding
Gatsby
up and
issue.
down for the
Get you
most
by the
part.
accounting issue.
We have nodding up and down for the most part, that is what the item will be for our next board meeting. All right, thank you. Again, I could comment on Dr. Chesney's comments earlier. That was a couple weeks of very, very healthy, productive debate and dialogue, and it's nice to see
A
us.
couple of weeks, only 2 people on camera.
Well, there was some phone conversations and whatnot, but during the board meetings as well, and it's nice to see that at the end of the day, there's actually a consensus to a compromise, and I think that's what we're here to do. So, all right, thank you, Dr. Chesney. That takes us up to for information, curriculum and instruction, Dr. Surrey.
Thank you. I kind of wanted to bring to the board's attention this evening, I don't know if you noticed in the Detroit News this weekend, there was an article, an editorial on called "Michigan Schools Must Play Catch-Up." And it was based on the Education Trust Midwest Report, which is based on the National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP test, that we randomly given across this country to 4th graders, 8th graders, and 12th graders in reading, math, science, actually many other things as well. And then NAEP rank orders states and achievement in those different areas. I think NPR talked about it this morning. I heard that they did as well, but I would invite you to look this up. It's a very disturbing report. Once again, Michigan, in 2013, our students across the state fell in terms of ranking. We were in the 30th percentile in terms of state rankings in math and reading. I'm talking about 4th grade particularly. And the report found this time that even white students, and I'm quoting this, are on track to perform 49th out of 50 states in 4th grade reading by 2019. So it's, the report goes on to have an action plan that's put together by the Education Trust. And so when I read things like this, it really gets my attention. It's really disturbing to me, and it sort of feeds in you hear people say, well, why are you looking at Saline or Ann Arbor, what they're doing? You should be looking at other states to see what they're doing, because Michigan's really in the middle of the pack or below the national average in so many areas of achievement. So that's in the back of my mind, and so I read this report, and one of the things that said in the report is to make sure by 2016 that Michigan looks at what the high-performing states are doing, and the highest-performing state is Massachusetts, and in 4th grade reading, Florida's right up there on the top, and Tennessee as well. So I went to these websites, and I've done this in the past, as some of you probably have as well. I went to the Department of Education in Massachusetts, and there was a video on there, and it's still linked on their homepage, that's for a turnaround elementary school, and it talks about what they put into place to bring them from an underperforming district to a high-performing district. And when we get together on the 18th, I believe, of June, and we have an opportunity to talk about curriculum instructional issues and goals for our strategic planning, I want to share part of that video with you. It's 8 minutes. I've already kind of taken my notes, and I would just share those with you. But I want to tell you something. There wasn't anything happening at that Massachusetts school that isn't happening in Brighton area schools. And I looked at from being data-driven, collaborative planning, but it was all about the instruction, the quality and instructional practice. And our coaching model that we have here, that's another thing that they put into place there. Just thing after thing, we're already doing here. And I tell you, that's one of the reasons why I do look at Ann Arbor, and I do look at some of the Oakland County schools, or Saline, or Rockford, because those schools are also performing very similar to what's happening in Massachusetts. So you might read this report, you might hear people in the community say, what's going on with education, because Brighton gets painted with this Michigan. We're very different. What we're doing here is actually very, very intentional, very much grounded and rooted in best practice. And the other thing that came up in the highest performing states was a very clear, laser-like focus at the Department of Education and the legislature on what they wanted their graduates to be like, what they wanted them to attain. And they mentioned in this report that we can't seem to get in sync with our two entities in Lansing. But we need for this board to be focused on, and articulate what it is we're working towards here, because we've got all the tools and all the skills to do it. And so take a look at that. I just want to prepare you, because you might get people in the community say, we saw this, or we heard it on NPR. That's not our story. Our story, because if you think of, just so you know how good Massachusetts is, and they passed a law in like 1996 to really support education across the board, with their curriculum, their assessments, the whole thing, and they've stuck to it. Their implementation has been very good. If they were a country, they'd be number 2 in the world in reading, and number 6, I believe, the article said, in math. So, you know, it's an amazing thing, but we're doing the same things. And so I put our kids up against those Massachusetts schools, actually. So like I said, I'd like to invite you to look at that so you're prepared when people, if they ask you questions, because sometimes these things take on a little life of their own, and that's not our story here. So the only other thing I wanted to tell you is that we're meeting with the principals this week, the K-6 principals, and looking at our world language program for next year. We're going to be offering it at 3rd and 4th grade, as promised. And I'll be able to share more details with you after that meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Going back to your first set of comments, is that, you know, our story is a good story in the midst of a bigger bad story.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have suggestions as to how we get that good story out? You know, it's like how, you know, we should become knowledgeable, we should read this article, we should know the BAS story, but how else can we get that story out to the community? Do you have suggestions?
Well, I think we do a good job getting the story out to the community through the Friday letters. Through I mean, seriously, the best way to get it out to the community is when our parents and teachers and staff meet in the grocery store, and they share the good news of what's happening. You know, if more and more, I know that our coaches are very active across the district, and they're looking for ways to document that, not just student growth, but teacher growth, and putting that online formats. I know our technology is helping us with that. The other thing that we do in this district that I think is similar to what's happening in great states like Massachusetts is they use this collaborative leadership and team focus. So I mentioned several times our instructional coaches, but we also have our media specialist team, our technology coach team, our RTI facilitators, our educational assistants. We have teams of people that are constantly collaborating, and that kind of takes me back to the importance of having time for them to collaborate. And that's something that Massachusetts and those states have a lot of it as well. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I just took it as an opportunity to say more about, I think we're doing very well, but it's something for us to think about is how do we keep that message strong.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Suri, for bringing up the achievement of the great state of Massachusetts.
You're welcome. Don't forget Florida. Oh, and by the way, when you dig into the data, because I did go into the NAEP report then, you'll want to hear this, by eighth grade reading, Michigan's not teetering at the bottom anymore, it's more in the middle of the pack. So I'm not sure if the other states are falling or if we're surging. I'm not sure why that is, but we perform better at the 8th grade level in reading in terms of the 50 states. So there's some good news there.
Can I ask a question? What's the percentage of schools and districts in Michigan that take this test? I don't think
used to know it.
Brighton's ever taken.
Oh, no, we do take the NAEP quite a bit, actually. We have it at Scranton every few years. That, like I said, it's kind of a random selection.
Okay.
And even within that, they randomly select the district, they randomly select the elementary school if there's multiple, and then they randomly select the kids. You don't get to send the ones you want down to test. They randomly select it. So I don't know what that number is, but I could find that out for you. I used to, just don't remember it.
Yep.
A short time ago, Dr. Suri, wasn't Florida like at the bottom?
Yes.
So how many years?
Tennessee was at the bottom, too.
Right. So how many years looking at this program?
That's where I just moved from.
Well, that's the point. These have surged from being at the bottom to the top, and this whole article and the plan is to put Michigan in the top 10 by 2030. Well, we've got a lot of work to do across the state, but a lot of it has to do with getting the legislature and the Department of Education on the same page and getting really focused on what we want for our kids and then implementing it well.
Any other comments? Thank you, Dr. Suri, as always. Next up, bills. We have a packet.
May 15th bills are in the packet for your review, and under superintendent, I only have about an hour and a half report, so I'll start.
Financial strategy, item number 2. Mr. Chesney has a
Oh.
couple comments you'd like to make.
Yeah, I've got just a couple of comments. This is, I firmly, no PowerPoints today. Sorry about that. But I firmly believe in the importance of extracurriculars to the BAS experience. But as I've mentioned, multiple times, that kind of my priorities I'll always stress curriculum improvement, retirement of old debt, and having some kind of emergency fund set up. With that in mind, at this meeting and several times in several different ways, we've talked about this kind of nebulous idea of, boy, if we could just give time to our teachers, that great things could happen. And time is, it's a nice concept, but similar to what Mr. Thompson did tonight with talking about the athletic schedule and give us very, concrete numbers. Dr. Suri, could I ask at some point in the future, perhaps at the next meeting, that we take this notion of time as a nebulous idea and turn it into, what are we really asking for? And how can we build that into our budget?
And what it costs.
And what it costs. What is it in terms of hours? What is it in cost of dollars? Where do the dollars go? How does that work? Just, we've said time. So if we could have some specifics on that, then that would help us build a curriculum and take some of these positive approaches, like the great state of Massachusetts and Tennessee and Florida. There you go. And then, good, okay, thank you.
So time is money.
Time is money. And then another item, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is as some of you might know, I'm a teacher by trade down at U of M, and they have what's called the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching. And they have grants that you can apply for when you have this idea of, here's an interesting thing that you want to try in the classroom. Okay? And so some of the ideas that I've tried in the classroom before are, one is, does storytelling help students to remember the curriculum that you're teaching on a long-term basis? And found no consistent relation. But another thing that we did is I got a small grant to check to see whether social context, doing things that are important to people, would actually draw more women into STEM fields and specifically into computer science. And in my courses, I found a 100% increase in the amount of females that I have over the national average. Okay? So with that in mind, this is what I'd like to ask for and put as for future action on the next agenda for June 8th, is some type of teaching improvement grants. And I'd like to ask for, start talking about specifics of perhaps something like $50,000 being put aside for $1,000 grants towards innovative types of teaching. And just talking about, how we could promote that and how we could actually, try to always pursue better teaching. And so that if teachers within Brighton area schools wanted to try something and there wasn't a traditional way of funding it, that we could come up with a grant-based, some internal grant. And I'll gladly, I've been working on specifics at least up here, and to talk about those and for future action at our next meeting. And I just think it'd be a great way to encourage great teaching within Brighton area schools.
I have a whole list for you.
Okay, good. There you go.
Is that internal grants, or is that applying to external?
No, internal.
Yeah, we fund.
Okay.
Yeah, we fund on the inside. So we have some limited amount of funds.
In her
some-
curriculum budget, there's X dollars that
Yeah.
are considered grant money that someone applies for to Dr. Suri and some panel of
Yes.
academic people. Okay.
And I'd like to just kind of scope that out and talk about what that might look like at the next meeting, and then we do this as a future action item, and then see if we promote that up and if that was
We'll have
possible.
$1 million in the budget next year just for
Can I
this.
tack something onto your list, Dr. Sir?
Wait,
It's kind of off. I'm sorry.
Ms. Meinerhead.
no, I just say, you keep giving Laura all this work.
Well,
Yeah, I'm taking ties right in with the time.
I wasn't giving Dr. Suri any work on that. I was just saying that the grant item, those are two separate items.
And
One of
the
them is the time.
Yeah, the time.
The grant thing, that's something that I want to talk about. That's something that I would
okay.
take as a burden on my shoulders. That's something that I've just seen have a positive effect in my classroom. That is a burden that I will squarely take on my shoulders. No problem. Okay.
Mr. Scott?
I would just like to tack on to the time idea, and I hear about this every night. It's my lullaby to sleep every night, as I'm married to a teacher. How much time is spent on testing versus the time you need to teach? Because you can find articles in all kinds of great states about that problem. And I'm just curious if it's just my wife or if it's everybody. Because I tend to think it's everybody. And you probably don't have to do much research to tell me that one.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll find out.
Thanks.
Can you do anything about the dandelions out there in the yard, Dr. Sir?
I understand they're good actually for the people
The
along.
whole ecosystem?
Right.
Okay, Superintendent, Dr. Gray, it's your hour.
No, I'm good. We're good.
Nothing?
The only thing I had was switchgear, and we've already talked about that.
Okay, but we talked about it up front. All right, student representative, how you doing tonight?
Doing good.
What do you have for us?
Okay, so,
You warm enough?
yeah. We recently went to, our school, we went to the Male Stars, and we did very well. And Derek Mason, one of the students at our school, won first place in public speaking event, and second place in the interview skills competition, and third place in art display. And I myself won first place for career portfolio, and Sophie Aboud won second place in art performance. Kayla Cope, Brittany Fox, Sophie Aboud, and Kylie North took second in Genius Kit competition. Finally, Derek Mason, me, Kayla Cope, and Sophie Aboud won the Life Smarts competition. This is the third year in a row that the Bridge has won Life Smarts. And I don't know if you guys heard, but Project Sticker Shock is something that I worked on before the weekend. And I was in the paper. And for those of you who don't know what that was, is we went around and we put stickers on cases of beer that stores let us put them on, saying don't sell beer to underage minors. And that went pretty fun. It was a lot of work. But the leadership class is working on benches that will be donated to Hornenberg Elementary School's garden in memory of Lisa Nagy. And Friday, May 22nd, the leadership team worked out in the community helping families with yard work. And the Bridge students will be helping Malt Beast Field Day on Friday, June 5th. And thank you and have a good night.
Thank you very much. Is this his last meeting?
I'm sorry.
Is this his last meeting, right, that we've done?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We really, really appreciate the student representatives, especially now the Bridge. It's really bringing everything that's happening in the district to us. That's really great. So thanks for coming and sharing that with us. All right. That leads us up to our second call of the public. If you'd like to address the board, you know the drill. There's the podium. You get 3 minutes. You'll be warned at 30 seconds with a yellow card by the referee to my left, your right. I see no one. That ends our second call to the public. We'll be going into closed session. Do I have a motion to move into closed session?
Make a motion that we enter closed session for the purpose of approving the May 11th, 2015 closed minutes.
Support. With motion and support, roll call, please.
Mr. Conley.
Yes.
Mr. Kraus.
Yes.
Mr. Marshfield. Mrs. Meyer. Yes. Mr. Conley.
Yes.
Dr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Strong.
Yes.
All right, we will go into closed session. We'll take a 5-minute recess prior to that.